Hey there, this is Dylan from Iju Brewing. Although this is not actually about brewing, this is something a little bit different. What I want to get into today is gardening. And not just gardening, but urban gardening. And not just urban gardening, but rooftop gardening. And even in one of the biggest, busiest cities in the world, this is something that anyone can get into. So here are the 4 things that you need to do to get started with an urban garden. First thing we're going to talk about is space. And I live in a really dense country, Korea, in an even denser city, Seoul, in an even denser neighborhood, Haebangchon. When you come here for the first time, it's basically just city. Tight roads, lots of buildings, not much space, and not much green space, until you look up. When you look up, you can start to make out some plants on the tops of the buildings, and many people here have gardens on their roofs. And I have one of those rooftops. When I was viewing the apartment for the first time, that was the main reason I wanted the place. There was all this empty space on the roof. The other tenants don't really use it. Landlord doesn't live here. And I basically have it to myself. But you don't really need this much space to start a garden. You could do this on a patio. You could even do this with a sunny window. Even if you have no room, you could even do some guerrilla gardening. There's a spot nearby where someone is kind of secretly growing some squash and maybe some other stuff. Something you do want to think about with gardening space is how much light you're going to get. If you don't have enough sunlight or you have too much sunlight, that is going to end up being a problem. Another thing you want to think about is permission. A garden is quite a bit of work, and you don't want to put all this time and energy into it just to have it ripped up or thrown away or taken out by the landlord. The next thing we're going to talk about is soil. This seems really simple, but this can end up being a really big problem, and especially when you're starting, it can be a little overwhelming. The first thing to keep in mind is that even a relatively small container is going to take a lot of soil to fill, a lot of soil. Most of the time when you buy soil, it is in these bags, maybe 35 liters, and it's not compacted. It's loose soil. And once you start actually putting this into a planter or a flower pot or something, you put water on it, the soil level is just going to go way down. And it can actually get pretty expensive and heavy to start to fill it up. So, like always, this might require a little bit of thinking outside the box. The first thing you do is make your own soil. If you have the space to garden, you probably also have the space to compost. Almost all fruit and vegetables will break down into soil eventually. Keep out any bones or animal products or anything that seems too solid. It won't break down. Everything else you just throw in and wait. If you are into brewing, like me, it's a good way to use up old grain. A downside is that it can take months or even a year for food to break down into workable soil. But a little hack that you can do is if you have a pot, you can put the raw compost on the bottom of the pot and then some nicer soil on top. Almost all plants will grow in this, and it will break down faster in a smaller pot. Another option is to just take the soil. I live near a mountain called Namsan, and it's full of soil. And I've been up there a couple times and just taken bags of it down to my apartment. One thing to keep in mind is that this soil is natural, urban soil, so it's full of rocks and trash and other stuff that you don't want. And I'm also not sure about the legality of this, so it's best to find somewhere secluded to dig where no one can see you. Other people will probably think you're doing something much worse than you actually are, and will probably be pretty surprised if you tell them what you're doing. Also keep in mind, soil is really, really heavy, and you're going to have to get it back home somehow. I take mine back on my scooter that I have, but if you're doing it just on your back and on foot, it's going to be pretty tough. And like we said before, you need a lot more than you think. Another hack is to fill the bottom 30% of a container with dried leaves. You can pick these up while you're getting the soil, a little easier to carry. Now we have all this soil, we need a place to put it. So next thing we're going to talk about is containers. Personally, I like wooden containers. They age well and can be used over several years. Anything made of plastic will start to disintegrate after a season of direct sunlight, and you start getting this microplastic mixing with the soil. If you have any basic woodworking skills, you can probably make the planters yourself out of old wood. For mine this year, I made them out of old pallets that I found in the neighborhood. Cloth pots are also a good option. They're cheap, sturdy, and drain well. All that being said, if you have extra plastic tubs or pots, just use them. It's always best to start small and start cheap and work your way up. Also, each container should be big enough to keep 30 centimeters of soil, 30 centimeters deep of soil. Keep in mind that smaller pots will dry out faster, and many plants are not going to grow as well and not going to be as happy in a smaller pot. Also, anywhere you put a pot, underneath it will get really, really dirty and really stained. So keep that in mind if you think your landlord or landlady might get a little mad about it. The last thing we're going to talk about today is water. Honestly, this can be a real problem. So much of a problem that this might keep people out of gardening altogether. Think, where am I going to get the water? How hard is it to get? And can I do this every day? For my particular situation, there is no water hookup on the roof where the garden is. At first, I would just carry the water up from my apartment, which is right below, in big 26-liter buckets I was using for brewing. The issue is that you need a lot of water, and you need it often. When the heat really kicks in after the rainy season here in July and August, you have to water every day. And even missing 2 days of watering, you can actually kill or permanently damage a lot of your plants. My solution to this was to run a hose from a faucet in my bathroom through the bathroom window and up to the roof. This works, although it's a bit of a hassle to turn the water off and on. Also, the connections on the hose can't really handle sustained pressure, so I can't keep it on. I have to turn it on every time I want to use it. But it works. And really, making it work is kind of what urban gardening is all about. And that's it for an urban garden. Space, soil, containers, water. That's all you need. In the next video, we're going to talk about 10 plants that I think do really well in an urban garden. Hope to see you there. Bye.